Greetings. I wanted to make this video as a warning to the world and post it at the beginning of the year to see how much of it, if any, comes to pass. The year which I'm referring to as the year of chaos. All signs point to 2016 being a turbulent year, and while this should come as a surprise to no one who's paying attention, I will nevertheless outline some of my reasons for calling it the year of chaos. Let's start here in the United States. 2016 is a presidential year, and not just a presidential year, it's also the final year of President Obama's term in office. You might recall that when he first came to office, he wanted to fundamentally transform the United States. And while he succeeded in his quest to a degree, he was unable to transform it to the extent he had envisioned. I believe this is going to create within him a sense of urgency. He's going to do everything within his power, and probably a few things not within his power, to try and bring about as many changes as possible in 2016. In order to do this, he's going to absolutely push the limits of what he thinks he can get away with. He's already changed the healthcare law several times without Congress's permission. He refuses to enforce certain immigration laws as required by the Constitution simply because he doesn't like them. So there's no telling how far he'll go in the time he has left. Now, how does this lead to chaos? What a silly question. It's further going to divide the country between those who think he's exceeding his constitutional authority and those who don't. It also sets a precedent for future presidents who will try and do the same thing. I don't want to guess just how far he'll go, but let me just say that I'm not ruling anything out. Virtually nothing he tries will surprise me. Now let's look at the presidential election itself. The Republican field is so crowded that there's already been talk of a brokered convention. And while brokered conventions are not unprecedented in our country's history, at a time when our nation is as divided as it is, it would be problematic. In addition, the current frontrunner, Donald Trump, is a very polarizing figure just within the Republican Party itself. So much so that he's openly questioned whether or not the Republican leadership might try and force him out should he win the nomination. On the Democratic side, we have a frontrunner who is currently under investigation by the FBI for conducting official State Department business on a private server operated out of her own home. If she gets indicted, that would throw the Democratic nomination into chaos. And if she's not indicted, a significant portion of the population would be convinced that she benefited from political power and privilege. And at a time when a majority of Americans believe there's two sets of rules, one for the ruling class and one for the rest of us, such a decision would only reinforce that perception. So you can see there's turmoil shaping up on both sides of the political aisle. All of this is likely to spill out onto the international stage. The world has changed dramatically just in the last few years, and it's poised to change even more in 2016. This is due in large part to President Obama's worldview. As driven and determined as he's been to force domestic change, he's been just as equally timid on foreign policy. And this has allowed other nations to become more aggressive. Like it or not, since becoming a superpower, the United States has served as a force for stability in the world. And our diminishment has only destabilized things significantly. Nowhere is this more evident or troublesome than in the Middle East. Since our withdrawal, we created a vacuum that was quickly filled by Russia and her regional ally, Iran. And now Russia has supplanted America's influence and hegemony in the Middle East. Think about what that means. Russia, a nation run by a committee of one. Vladimir Putin has tried to extend Russia's reach as far and as wide as possible since he came to power. At the same time, he's tried to reduce America's role in the world as much as possible. And finally, he's Vladimir Putin. Does anybody expect him to serve as a force for stability in the world? Not likely. And on the subject of the Middle East, the topic cannot be discussed without mentioning the Islamic Caliphate, or ISIS, or ISIL, or Daesh, or whatever you want to call it. But here's an entity which strikes fear in the hearts of people like nothing I've seen in my lifetime. Its ability to bring new members into its fold, to raise revenue, and to conduct terrorist attacks is incredibly efficient. But I don't want to speculate on its future. I don't know whether it's going to come to dominate or be destroyed. What I do believe is that it's going to serve a much more sinister role, and that is to act as a catalyst to draw the other nations of the world into the region. Already the United States, Russia, Great Britain, and France are conducting airstrikes over ISIS targets. Skies are getting pretty crowded over there, and there doesn't seem to be any type of organizational system in place. This creates the possibility of the fighting to spill over its current borders and spread into a wider conflict, as evidenced by the shooting down of a Russian fighter by Turkey. Tensions between those countries have skyrocketed. One of the major countries, though, which has been unaffected by ISIS is China. That's because ISIS is targeting the West. But China's been busy all by itself. It's currently building artificial islands in the South China Sea in order to expand its influence into that region. And that's creating tension with its neighbors down there. At the same time, China is building its military at an unprecedented rate. Its ultimate goal is to replace the United States as the world's top superpower. And I fear that it might take a major step in 2016 by making a move against Taiwan. The United States is required by treaty to come to Taiwan's defense in such an event. But Obama's reluctance to use military power, even for a just cause, might be enough to make China test America's resolve. By the same token, we could see a similar situation play out on the Korean Peninsula. Kim Jong-un has been making belligerent overtones toward South Korea for years, and he is not a rational person. A trait which seems to run in his family. And the last thing I will say about the Year of Chaos has to do with a threat of our own making. The U.S. national debt is approaching $19 trillion, and soon it will reach $20 trillion. That's nearly twice what it was when President Obama took office. Admiral Mike Mullen has called the debt the greatest national security threat that we face. That's because a strong national defense is dependent upon a strong economy. And at the rate we're spending and will continue to spend for the foreseeable future, the U.S. economy will eventually collapse. It cannot be avoided. Several political philosophers have argued that democracies cannot survive indefinitely due to their inability to exercise fiscal restraint. And that appears to be the case with the United States. Now, lest you think that this was just a recitation of doom and gloom, let me try and put your mind at ease a bit. There's good news. None of what is happening today is unexpected. It's been known for a long, long time. And events are going to play out exactly as they're supposed to. Because the authorities of this world have to submit to an even greater authority. The authority that has the power to bring the dead back to life. Lift up your eyes to the sky, then look to the earth below. For the sky will vanish like smoke, and the earth will wear out like a garment, and all its inhabitants will die like flies. But my salvation will endure forever, declares the Lord of hosts. Isaiah 51:6. The choice is yours. You can remain a part of this world and wallow in its misery, or you can escape its earthly bounds and overcome the chaos that's headed our way. The time is growing short. The human race is so predictable. It's fascinating to watch the world descend into madness. And for those of you who know what I'm talking about, it won't be long now. Take care.